And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another fantastic installment from very high above all the puerile and insipid forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Friday, and a busy Friday it's going to be, my friends. I'm finally getting back in the groove of things. You know, you're gone from the studio for a few days, and you just kind of forget, as Ken would say, I forget what all these buttons do. But welcome back to the show. It is, in fact, it's Open Line Friday. That's right, my friends. Open Line Friday on Cowboy State Politics. This is the day where we talk about whatever you want to talk about, whatever's on your mind that you've been wanting to get out. Well, today is the day to do it. Just give me a call at 307-374-8989, 307-374-8989. You see, normally during the week, you kind of have to talk about what I want to talk about. I mean, it is my show, and the reason why you watch is to see what I think about things. And so that's what we do normally on the program. But on Friday, we will talk about whatever is on your mind. You have no idea the danger I put this program under. But we do it anyway, because, I mean, there's a ton of stuff happening, and I would love to hear your thoughts on it. So anyway, the number here in the studio is 307-374-8989. And yeah, that'll get you right to me, and we'll talk about it. So whatever you've been thinking about. On today's program, we're gearing up for the legislative session, and isn't it amazing how throughout the year we don't have any money to spend? And if you cut anything anywhere, we're going to have to fire policemen and no more fire protection. And, we're just not going to be able to run the city, and we should just close City Hall. That's the rest of the year. That's every other time except right before the legislative session. And even in some cases, we're told that there's just not enough money to spend. And if you cut anything, man, it is just going to destroy everything. And then magically, as if it were manna from heaven, we end up with a surplus. In this case, it's $250 million. Now, what exactly is a surplus? Well, I mean, you would think that after you've determined all of the things that you have to spend money on, you've paid all the bills, make sure the gas tank is full, everything else is taken care of, food in the refrigerator, and then you have money left over. That is a surplus. So taking into account everything that we spend money on in the state of Wyoming, and we pay all those bills and we allocate it all, and everybody's happy and fat, and we're like pigs feeding in a trough, then we find out we have $250 million extra. What that means is that we have overtaxed Wyoming citizens to the tune of $250 million. $250 million. If you have money left over, it means you're taxing too much. But in the same breath, those people that will tell you before we find out that we have $250 million. It's the same people that will say, if you cut taxes at all, everything will be destroyed. Then, after it's announced that we have a big giant surplus, those are the same people that still say, no, if you cut anything, it will completely close the doors on the Wyoming Capitol, which, by the way, I may be in favor of. But you see, they can't have it both ways. Either you have a surplus and you've overtaxed everybody, or you don't have a surplus, in which case, you're stretching all your pennies. But the truth is, almost every single year when the budget session kicks off, we find out that we've overtaxed our citizens. And it's for that one reason that I'm completely in favor of the ballot initiative that's going to be on the ballot this year to reduce your taxes by 50%. I'm totally in favor of that. If you've got $250 million left over, there's no reason why you need to continue to tax Wyoming citizens at the rate that you are. And, the liberal argument there is, well, we got to save up for a rainy day, for those boom and bust cycles. Well, frankly, you already have $30 billion in the bank. Wyoming has the largest sovereign wealth fund of any state. And now the governor wants to add another $250 million to it. So anyway, there's that going on. And we should know by now that this is just kind of a perennial story. I'm sure the vultures at the Pravda on the Platte and the redcoats at the Cowboy have a story that's they just set it on the shelf, and every year around this time, or every budget session around this time, they pull it off the shelf, dust it off a little bit, change the dates on it, and just publish it again, because it's the same story every single time. And, Wyoming citizens, we should just get pretty sick of that. I know that I do. But let's begin this morning with a piece that it actually makes sense from the screens of the Cowboy. And this one is a column by Dave Simpson. I actually like him. At one point we were going to set up an interview and he was going to come on the program, but it never worked out. But he's about the only one at the Cowboy that has any brains about him. And in this case, the piece is called "The Freedom Caucus Criticism is All the Rage for Weak Sauce Republicans." Now, this is the term that Dave Simpson uses to describe redcoats. He calls them weak sauce Republicans. I guess it's as accurate as anything else. Of course, nothing could be quite as good as my term for them, redcoats. But anyway, Simpson writes, "Freedom Caucus criticism is all the rage lately with our weak sauce Republican friends. Ads, opinions, disrespect, perfidy, all around dyspepsia and grumpiness. This trend brings to mind the famous quote from Oddball. It's Donald Sutherland in the movie Kelly's Heroes. Always with the negative waves, Tank Commander Oddball scolds one of his soldiers. Why don't you knock it off with them negative waves?" Well, I'm not familiar with Kelly's Heroes. I'm probably from a different generation than Mr. Simpson. But the way our weak sauce Republican friends talk, you'd think that their BVDs are a bit too tight. It's giving them a wedgie. Or, as Agent 29 famously said on the floor, stop getting your panties in a wad. Now, the way our weak sauce Republican friends have put it, that we've waited a whole 2.5 years, a whole half of a 2-year legislative term. It's hard to get through the language here. Freedom Caucus critics have declared the votes we cast in 2024, putting the Freedom Caucus in the driver's seat in the Wyoming House, but less so in the Senate. We're all just one big mistake, and we should all be ashamed of ourselves, apologize, and seek forgiveness from the all-knowing status quo. But if you ask me, and this is the part that I agree with Dave Simpson on, well, actually, I agree with a great deal of what he's written here. But if you ask me, and once again, I'll point out that you didn't. Well, you did. That's why you watch this program. I have no problem with the Wyoming Freedom Caucus members agreeing with D.C. Freedom Caucus big shots on the things on which we agree. But the truth is, the Freedom Caucus doesn't take their marching orders from anybody in D.C., and the only person that sends out any sort of text messages, I don't even know if she still does this, is Jesse Rubino, who is the administrative person for the Freedom Caucus. That's the only person. Nobody in D.C., there are no D.C. overlords, though it makes for a nice narrative, I guess. But the question here is to all of the critics of the Freedom Caucus, why are you so opposed to every one of their policy agenda items? Why? Why aren't you in support of all the things that the Freedom Caucus has put forward? Why is it such a bad thing that we stop spending ridiculous amounts of money on heads of agencies to the tune of $24,000 a month? Why is it such a bad thing that we get him back in line with all the other state employees? Why is it a bad thing that we stop spending money on an agency that has decreased our overall GDP over their entire existence? Why should we get rid of those? I mean, why is that a bad idea? Or a better question, if you already have another agency that is doing the exact same thing as the agency in question, why not eliminate one of them? And perhaps maybe get rid of the one that's not so efficient, like the Wyoming Business Council. You see, those are the things that the media is never going to tell you about. That the truth is that they're all apoplectic about getting rid of the Wyoming Business Council. I mean, in fact, I've got a piece in here. Gordon calls it nuts, I think, that we're going to get rid of the Business Council. But he never tells you that there's a whole another agency called the Wyoming Grants Office that does exactly the same thing. And we don't pay them nearly as much as we do Josh Durrell. But see, none of that ever comes up in these discussions, nor does it ever enter the conversation that we have $250 million over and above all of the ridiculous spending that we're doing with the Wyoming Business Council, the Department of Health, the Wyoming Department of Education, all of that. So, I mean, the media is never really going to tell you the truth on any of this, but they should. And they should answer the question of why are the policy prescriptions that the Freedom Caucus is putting forward, why are they so bad? Why would lowering taxes be a bad thing? Well, they've convinced a whole bunch of people that we have to have all of these government services. Well, and they never ask the question of whether or not that's the proper role of government. Why is it that you shouldn't take care of all these things yourselves? Why is it that we think that the government needs to be involved in private business? Well, you heard Josh Durrell say that we have to create an economic system.
I believe it's our job to give opportunities to those people that want to stay in Wyoming but don't see a future. Now, I don't believe it's our job to give them that. Let me restate that. I believe it's our job to develop a system, an economic system, that will allow for those people to reach their potential here.
Oh, so it's his job to create an economic system. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that we already have one. It's supposed to be called free market capitalism. But why is it such a bad thing that we decide we're not going to let unelected bureaucrats like Josh Durrell spend tremendous amounts of money on things that have a dubious outcome? Why is that such a bad thing? Or let me ask you another one. Why is it so terrible that we have an election that has integrity to it? Why is it such a bad thing that we increase the security of all of our elections and hold those people that make a mess out of things accountable, like the Weston County Clerk? Now, they've since backed off of defending her because the Natrona County prosecutor has said, no, all of these charges are absolutely appropriate. Have you noticed that you haven't seen anything in the media recently about Becky Hadlock? It's because they know that's a losing argument. And they know that the more they continue to talk about it, it's just more evidence as to why we need to make changes in the way that we hold elections. I mean, all you have to do is look at what the media is not talking about to find out what's actually going on in the state. And it's not that hard. But the big question to all of the critics of the Wyoming Freedom Caucus, and frankly, I would say that those people who are in the Wyoming Freedom Caucus, your response ought to be, yes, I am. Why aren't you? Why don't you support secure elections? Why is it that you support taxing people into oblivion? Why is it that it's okay that we've overtaxed Wyoming citizens to the tune of $250 million? Why is that okay? Why don't you write a check to all of these organizations that you want me to give my money to? You see, when you confront critics like Better Wyoming and Nate Martin, oh, by the way, this is fantastic. he's been doing surveys lately. Better Wyoming. They call it Better Wyoming AR, which the A stands for activism, and the R allegedly stands for research. But when you do these online surveys, the only thing they are intended to do is to gauge the amount of support or lack of support that the Freedom Caucus has. And Nate Martin is an activist, always has been. He is, he's funded by Liz Storr, or at least he has been historically. And Better Wyoming, they are nothing more than the left's, I guess you could call it propaganda arm. But they have been conducting surveys statewide, and weird, I don't get these surveys. I have no idea why none of these things ever hit my phone. It could be because I have this program. But the criticism of the Wyoming Freedom Caucus is all the rage. Let's go back to what Dave Simpson says. Things like no boys, and here's the policies that the Freedom Caucus is in favor of, and you just tell me why any of these are a bad thing. Like no boys playing in girls' sports, no dirty books in the children's section of libraries, no encouraging teens to switch teams when it comes to gender, no keeping secrets from parents when it comes to teens switching teams and when it comes to gender, no drag queens performing in front of little kids, supporting low taxes, opposing huge national debt, opposing vaccine mandates, and requiring an ID at the polls, just like at the liquor store or to go get on a plane. Why are any of those things bad? Now, I had a back and forth with, I guess he's a listener. I don't know. Probably not, because he wasn't very informed. I mean, if you listen to this program, you're a pretty informed guy. But anyway, I was having a back and forth with him. And the first comment was, all of these things that the Freedom Caucus supports are just indefensible. And when I asked him, okay, specifically, now be specific here, what things are indefensible that you're referring to? And he said, well, cutting the UW budget. Okay, well, we covered that yesterday on the program. That's Wyoming PBS. If Wyoming PBS is so great, why can't they compete in the free marketplace of ideas like every other media outlet? Like this program. Why is it that they have why are they still using an antenna? And the one that they're using is from the Cold War. Why is it? Why is it that they haven't repaired any of those things? Well, because they've been getting fat and happy off of your checkbook. Why is protecting the life of the unborn such a bad thing? And, a question for all of these opponents of all of these conservative ideas is, why is it that you continually just repeat the drivel that comes from the left wing and never look into it on your own? The truth is, since the abortion ban was, or the first injunction was issued by Melissa Owens, abortions in this state are up around 350%. Now, that's not me saying that. That was an article in the Cowboy. 350% more babies are dying because of the policies that liberals in this state are supporting. And so why is that such a good thing? Force these people, critics of the Freedom Caucus, to defend their argument. Put it back in their face. Just say, yes, I am. Why aren't you? I mean, it seems to be a simple proposition for me. But there again, I have my program, and they don't. Let's see here. Now, Simpson ends his piece thusly, and I quote, "And this is the state that's on the road to ruin at the hands of the Freedom Caucus. Representative John Baer and Rachel Rodriguez-Williams have done yeoman's work in defending the work of the Freedom Caucus in the face of withering, incessant criticism. It would be great, given the intensity of the current opposition to the Freedom Caucus, for Speaker Diamond, now Speaker of the House, to once again weigh in on the common sense thinking and the hard work thus far, and the many accomplishments already made by the Wyoming Freedom Caucus. Time for someone with the heft of the Speaker to cut through all the negative waves." Well, and it's, the negative waves that Simpson is referring to are those coming from the publication that puts out his opinion column, the Cowboy, the Wyoming Tribune Eagle, the Pravda on the Platte, sometimes when they actually do news. Oh, wait, basically all of Wyoming media except this program. So, I mean, it's I don't see any reason why they just shouldn't push back. I mean, the election's coming up. And what the left is trying to do is create a narrative for the election. And so that if the person that you're running for against is a member of the Freedom Caucus, the left is trying to create a campaign issue for you, to say, oh, look, Freedom Caucus evil, and that you never have to defend what the reasons behind that are. See, a lot of these people, if you push back on them, if you make them defend their argument, you'll find out that there isn't anything behind it, and the only thing there is talking points, because that's how the left functions. That's how the Wyoming media functions, and it's there's very little, and I've got by the way, I have a piece here from Landon Brown. He's once again popped his head up. I thought maybe perhaps we'd be done with him, but no. So we're going to take a quick break. I know it's a little bit early, but we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about Landon Brown. But first, an absolutely outrageous profit timeout. Are you tired of all the meaningless political drivel floating around right now? Endless commentary that really doesn't have anything backing it up? Do you long for the days of true investigative journalism coming from an authoritative source who really doesn't care how popular and apparently good-looking a politician is? Fortunately for you, that's what I do on Cowboy State Politics. New episodes are published every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and you can get them anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest way is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There, you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles I might bring up during the course of the program. Cowboy State Politics Live, the program you're listening to right now, is broadcast every Tuesday through Friday, beginning at 8 a.m. Pay attention to all of that other block-headed nonsense if you want. Just make sure that you don't miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live on a Friday. It's Open Line Friday, so if you want to call in and be a part of the program, the phone number here in the studio is 307-374-8989, 307-374-8989. Whatever's on your mind, whatever you've been thinking about, whatever you just want to complain about. I'm game. I do this for you so that you can have an outlet for all of your frustrations. Well, maybe not all of them. But anyway, if you want to be part of the show, go ahead and give me a call. There are so many times in politics that I just wonder, where did that guy run off to? We used to hear from him all the time. And now, just pretty much not at all. And there were lots of statements that Landon Brown put up that, he's having to find a new house and for him and his little dog. I'm not even kidding you. These are statements that he put out. Well, now he's back. He has put out a statement on his Facebook page, and he's so concerned, so incredibly concerned about the actions of the Wyoming Freedom Caucus. Now, by the way, it has been 2,188 days since Landon Brown agreed to come on this program, and then just didn't show up. And it's not for lack of me trying. I have attempted several times to get Landon Brown to come on the show. and just sit down and have a conversation. Maybe we'll be able to grab him during the legislative session and get him into our nightly news broadcast on the Open Range Record. Maybe we'll be able to do that. I don't know. But it's already been 2,188 days since he was supposed to be on this show. But here, and every time I do show prep, I've got this little gizmo right over here, and it's got all the sound bites on it. And so often what I do is I see what I did last year, and there's already a folder created with the date on it, so I don't like recreating the wheel. And so I just search for previous sound bites, and you never know what you're going to find. So here is Mr. Landon Brown. This is the mystery sound bite of the day, but let's go ahead and give it a listen.
This is exactly what everybody's been talking about. This gives you the opportunity to vote on real tax relief.
Oh!
True property tax relief. This is going to put about $4,000 back in my pocket. It's no secret. You can go look it up on the county assessor's website. How much money is this going to put? This is true tax dollars, ladies and gentlemen. Right now it has the backfill. It's going to keep our counties whole, $225 million. I heard it loud and clear.
Oh, I know which one this
Stop the
is.
debate.
Members for their first time. Representative Johnson, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am on and against this amendment.
All right. That wasn't quite as exciting as we thought it would be. But there's Landon Brown. Anyway, now he's on his Facebook page again. And here's how he starts out again. And I quote, "The recent actions by the Joint Appropriations Committee have spurred a robust reaction." I think there's a bit of a typo there, Landon. "If you need my help with your grammar, just let me know. From a variety of people throughout the state and even outside of our state. It is imperative that we take a serious look at the proposed cuts made and determine the impact on our state's reputation, our future, and current residents. I want to be clear, and I don't want to mince words with those who claim these tax dollars are anything more than the extractive industries that have propped up our state for the last 135 years. So this is a common argument with people like Landon Brown that claim that all of this surplus, the $250 million that I mentioned earlier, that really that's money that was paid by our extractive industries, by the coal mines, the folks that produce oil and gas. The truth is, though, my friends, that companies don't pay taxes. They don't pay them at all. You know who does? You. You are the ones that pay taxes, and let me tell you how this works. So when people like Landon Brown insist on higher taxes for our extractive industries, what happens? Well, the price of their product goes up. It's simple. Those taxes get passed on to consumers because a company's not going to absorb those taxes. They're in the business of making money, and they know that they have a product that you have to have. So why wouldn't they raise the price of it? The truth is, my friends, that there isn't a company around that pays higher taxes. That is all borne by you in the increase in costs. But Landon Brown continues, Brandon Brown. Anyway, the recent proposed cuts to the Wyoming Business Council have me troubled, very, very troubled, in a multitude of ways. This is a larger discussion than a single committee vote that has taken place, and it's important to remember it takes a lot for a bill to become law. We're only seeing proposals here which are akin to ideas. The path forward is bleak and thus unlikely to succeed as a complete defunding and elimination. However, the reduction in funds, loss of jobs, and impacts to communities are very real. You see, there again is the mythical group of jobs. The reason why I say it's mythical, your job isn't mythical. My job isn't mythical, and neither is the lovely Christine's. But what is mythical is the idea that government creates jobs. Government can't create jobs that contribute to the economy. I've told you why a lot of time, but let me go over it again. Now, let's say that YDOT creates a position for you. Maybe you're going to be a new snowplow driver, though I think that this year you probably want to find a different occupation. But anyway, you've been hired to be a snowplow driver from the Wyoming Department of Transportation. Works out pretty good for you. The wages are pretty high, though, some people would argue that they're not high enough. And then the benefits are great. And you're set, right? You can buy groceries for your kids and your family and pay your rent and all of those things. But when you do pay your bills, You take your taxpayer-funded paycheck and use that to pay bills. Now, the only way that we really create any gains in our economy is if something new is created, a new product or a new service or, something other, some other thing that didn't exist in the marketplace before. And all of those, and well, let me put it this way. The only money that the government has to write your YDOT paycheck is tax dollars. So that is money that has been taxed, that has been generated from taxes of things in the real market, right? So the taxes you pay on your business or the sales taxes that you pay when you go buy something, or the property taxes that you pay every year to the government for the privilege of owning your own home. You see, that money has already been taxed. And so when you take your YDOT paycheck and you go to the grocery store and fill up your grocery cart, that's not money that's been generated by a new business. It's recycled tax dollars. And what's going to happen is you spend that tax money that you've earned through your paycheck, and then it gets taxed again. So it is reduction ad infinitum. We just continually tax the same pool of money. And that's why government can't create any increases in business. They can't really contribute to the economy because they don't have the means to do that. And so anytime you hear a politician like Landon Brown claim that they're going to be increasing jobs or creating jobs, you know from the very beginning that they're full of crap. Well, and their name is Landon Brown, so yeah, I mean, they're definitely full of crap anyway. But he continues, quoting now, "I am disappointed in the governor and the legislative branch leadership for not coming to the table in a more cooperative fashion over the past 365 days to discuss this agency and its budget directives." He's talking about the Wyoming Business Council. There were no secrets being held last year when the Freedom Caucus took over the House of Representatives that there was an issue at hand, and unless there were serious changes made throughout the next year, this was at the conclusion that would be drawn. This is a failure of communication on both sides, and thus will likely lead to 40-plus people, 40-plus jobs being eliminated in my community as well as others throughout the state. The 40 people that work at the Wyoming Business Council that have successfully decreased the GDP of Wyoming over the existence of their agency. These same 40 people that routinely pick winners and losers in the marketplace and force independent business owners to compete with government. These 40 people, who, by the way, have really no expertise in the market. Josh Durrell, the guy that's the head of the Wyoming Business Council, has a degree in mechanical engineering. Most of the people that work for the Wyoming Business Council have never really had a real job. Most of them are graduates from the University of Wyoming and don't have any education in the field of marketing or business or anything like that. They're head of HR, which, I mean, I would argue that HR is one of those positions that really doesn't do anything anyway. But their head of HR is a former bartender. Okay, I'm not saying anything bad about bartenders. What I am saying, though, is I don't think that you need to be employed by an agency that handles hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars and then give them out. Well, I don't think you should be giving out taxpayer dollars to businesses of your choice anyway. Well, the truth is that Josh Durrell and the Wyoming Business Council have admitted that they do indeed pick winners and losers, and that really is their job anyway. Now, remember, I just played for you the soundbite of Josh Durrell saying that it's his job to create an economic system, which is a ridiculous statement for him to make anyway. Let's see if I can get back to, we need another, here we go. Hold on just a second. Here we go. All right, Josh Durrell. Now, one of the reasons why they continue to operate the way that they do, and when you have people like Landon Brown defending them, it means that they pretty much agree with the argument behind why the Wyoming Business Council operates the way that it does. And this is Landon Brown we're talking about, so we know that he agrees with this one from Josh Durrell.
Now, mine happens to be a little longer term play than yours. However, you and I agree that it would be great if at a local level, our communities could do their own growth, that they could handle the ability to fund infrastructure and to make it so that they have streets and sidewalks and water lines.
Stop. Now, here's the thing. And this is a big, giant mirage that Josh Durrell is putting out there. They claim that, well, what most of what they do is, they support infrastructure projects. They give tax dollars to communities. Why is it then that across the state we find businesses that have received money from the Wyoming Business Council that really don't have anything to do with infrastructure? For example, $2 million to a cosmetics company in Jackson. Now, if you can afford to run your business out of Jackson, you can probably afford to do it without $2 million of taxpayer money. Or perhaps, maybe, move your business out of Jackson, stop paying the ridiculous amount of money that you do by living there, and you could probably run your business without the support of Wyoming taxpayers. I mean, but this is a giant. I don't want to call it a lie because it's like, yeah, it's a fabrication is what it is. Josh Durrell is glossing over the things that he actually spends your money on in favor of telling you about all these infrastructure projects, which nobody is arguing that we don't need quality infrastructure. Nobody on the right is saying we don't need water lines and sewer lines and, that we don't need nice, smooth roads to drive on. Nobody's arguing that. What we are saying, though, is that the money that the Wyoming Business Council gives out to independent businesses is far and above what it needs to be, and that is zero. But let's continue with what Durrell is saying here. He's about to tell you that the government you have is too small.
I think we both agree that that would be beautiful, and it would be awesome if the state didn't have to do that.
It doesn't.
And so that's really the problem we're solving as well, is that we have a community challenge and we have a population challenge. And we're trying to work on those two things, and those are at the end of the presentation I provided.
Stop.
And
all right. I am so sick of this bullcrap about Wyoming's population is going down. Wyoming young people are leaving the state and they never come back. Well, the truth is, if you look at the population of most Wyoming towns, it's pretty well stagnant. It's not increasing. It's not decreasing. I once tried to test this theory, so I went to the library in Johnson County and pulled newspapers from 1997. That's the year I graduated high school, just to see what the population of the town was. Listening to people like Josh Durrell, you would think that it would be significantly smaller than it was before. The truth is that the population is pretty much the same as it was 25 years ago. And if you look at other Wyoming communities, it ebbs and flows in different communities. Certainly, if you go to Otto, there's pretty much nothing there. There was at one time, I think there was like 10 people that lived there, but there's nothing there now. So people move around in the state, but generally speaking, this whole thing about Wyoming's population is going down and we're going to die as a state because of it, it's an overblown exaggeration. It's an exaggeration to begin with. It becomes overblown. The truth is, most people that grow up in this state do move away right after college. That's a natural progression. You want to get away from the thing that you've known for your entire life and go experience things. And then when you move to other places, you figure out that maybe the spot you left wasn't so bad after all. And then when you have a family, there's no better place to raise a family than in Wyoming. You bring all of those skills home. Now, how is it? Now, if the business environment in Wyoming is so terrible, how is it in a town of 20,000 people-ish, you can have over 60 hair salons? How is that possible? Well, it's because there is a demand for it. That if you allow the free market to work, it will function properly. If you just get out of the way and allow supply-side economics to work, it will. That if there is a demand for a product, people will buy it. And if there is a demand, other folks will open up a business to provide it. It just blows my mind that people like Josh Durrell and Landon Brown can't understand basic economics. And the truth is, maybe they don't want to because they've been so reliant on tax dollars and providing gifts to their pals that they don't want to look at the real economic conditions on the ground. But Landon Brown continues, the economic outfall of this is potentially even worse. Now, notice he doesn't cite any examples in this. I am concerned about the projects that are in negotiations but not on contract right now. I'm worried about community development funds that will be eliminated. and thus reducing our ability to attract business to Wyoming in the future. See, what Landon Brown is not telling you is what I started out the program with, that there is already another agency that does this very thing. There are two versions of the Wyoming, two agencies that do precisely the same thing, but one does it a heck of a lot more efficient than the other. One is the Wyoming Business Council. The other one is the Wyoming Grants Office. And part of the proposal coming out of the Joint Appropriations Committee is to move those functions from the Wyoming Business Council, some of them anyway, over to the Wyoming Grants Office, thus eliminating the Wyoming Business Council because they're not really doing that great of a job anyway. And they continually say stuff like this. Here you go.
Josh, do you think that one of the problems of the committee is they don't understand the infrastructure problem that we have? And basically, the private sector doesn't have to put in the infrastructure because they can go to other states. And I think when listening to them today almost made me think of them as Neanderthals, because they're thinking that somebody's going to bring in this infrastructure and pay for this infrastructure and make it happen. And I think that's what we need to do, is provide the infrastructure so they have the opportunity to come in at the same cost here as they do in New York.
Bruce Pivot, who happens to be on my board of directors. So Bruce, I hope I'm doing a good job.
Okay, so that's the attitude of the people at the Wyoming Business Council, that if you disagree with any of their ideas, then you are a Neanderthal. And they're totally shocked that the people they just insulted don't want to give them any money. Baffling, I know. Let's see here. All right, here we go. We need business here, and relying on our legacy industries to carry us for the next 135 years is not feasible. We must work to diversify. That may look much different than it does today for the Wyoming Business Council, but the complete dismantling of the agency is a knee-jerk action and is not a solution. So says Landon Brown. But you'll notice, and you can read this on his Facebook page, none of the things that Landon Brown says in his self-published op-ed have any specifics to them at all. There's not a single example to back up what he's saying, nor is there any data to support his theories. It's just liberal talking points from a very liberal legislator who, by the way, votes with the Democrats way more than he does with the Republicans, yet he continues to hang that R at the end of his name. Landon, can't wait to see you, man. Can't wait to replay the crazy stuff that you're going to say in the next legislative session. I mean, it's almost like Christmas when you go down there. You're having a bad day. You know, maybe you woke up late. I always get the swamp sickness when I'm down in Cheyenne. I always get this crappy cold. And, you know, so you leave the house, headed to the Capitol, and you don't feel that great. And then your spirits are lifted because you get to listen to the wacky things that people like Landon Brown say. My reaction to most of them is
Horse crap.
that was Lloyd Larson, by the way, on the floor of the House of Representatives. All right, let's talk about some national news here. There are some really important things that are happening. The Supreme Court is out with a couple of decisions. I guess this was yesterday. But they punted their decision on tariffs. But they did, however, rule on warrantless searches, election lawsuits, and double convictions, all things that are important. And this is from justthenews.com. The U.S. Supreme Court decided 3 cases Wednesday about political candidates standing to sue, warrantless searches, and double convictions. In a case of Case versus Montana, in a 9-0 decision, the court upheld the conviction of a Montana man for assaulting a police officer. What happened with him is there was a welfare check that was being done. He was hiding in a bedroom, and when a cop entered the room, the guy pulled out a gun and shot him. And the cop, well, I don't know. Hold on. I may have that backwards here. In 2021, police officers entered the home of William Case after a credible report that he was threatening suicide. While searching the home, one officer approached a bedroom closet in which Case was hiding. Case threw open the closet curtain while holding an object that looked like a gun, according to court documents. The officer shot and injured Case. Didn't kill him, just shot him. And so that guy sued and said, well, they didn't have a warrant. Well, according to the Supreme Court, that if you have a credible lead And it's, you're doing a welfare check, well, then the cops can enter your home. I don't know if I agree with that one, but hey, it's what the Supreme Court ruled. Now, there's another one, Barrett versus the U.S. In another opinion, the court clarified procedures for obtaining multiple criminal convictions for an individual act. The case focused on Dwayne Barnett, an individual who committed a series of robberies between August of 2011 and January of 2012. In one robbery, Barrett's accomplice shot and killed Gamar Defala. Prosecutors sought to charge Barrett with two separate convictions: unlawful possession of a gun during a crime of violence and causing the death of another while committing an offense. In the court's majority of opinion, Ketanji Brown Jackson said that Congress does not allow an individual to be duly punished for the separate crimes when it stems from a single act. At the very least, Congress did not clearly manifest a contrary intention, as it would have to do if it wished to authorize two convictions in these circumstances. And now this next one is the one that really piqued my interest this morning. Boast versus the Illinois State Board of Elections. In a 7-2 decision, justices on the court said an Illinois congressman had the right to sue the state over counting federal election ballots beyond Election Day. U.S. Representative Mike Boast, a Republican from Murfreesboro, filed a lawsuit against the state in 2022 for counting ballots postmarked on Election Day up to 2 weeks later. The court affirmed Boast had legal standing to sue without addressing whether states could allow mail-in ballots received after Election Day to be counted. Chief Justice John Roberts, in the majority opinion for the court, said individuals who sue must display a personal stake in a case to have standing. As a candidate for office, Roberts said Boast had that standing. Quote, "Candidates are not common competitors in the economic marketplace. They seek to represent the people," Roberts wrote, "and their interest in that prize cannot be severed from their interest in the electoral process." So in other words, yes, you do have standing to sue if there's a question about that. You see, there's been a lot of lawsuits lately that have been thrown out, and the reason given for all of them being dismissed is, well, you don't have standing. Well, the question then follows, who does have standing? If the person directly involved in the dispute doesn't have standing, then who exactly does? And then we create situations, and this is a great one, right? So the abortion lawsuit the abortion law that was just overturned by the Wyoming Supreme Court. Essentially, the court said, well, you don't really have standing. Yeah, because babies that are about to be aborted can't talk, and so who is left to advocate for them? I don't know. Ridiculous. And then let's see here. I think that was, yeah. So you do have standing if you're running for office, and the state that you're in is counting ballots months beyond or weeks beyond the actual election. So those are good things. Anytime the Supreme Court comes out with a ruling, you should probably pay attention to it because it does affect, what the Supreme Court says does affect what happens in Wyoming. Let's see here. All right. So this one here, another one that you probably should be concerned about, but I don't think that it really has any hope in passing. From the Daily Caller, Chris Murphy wants to jack up taxes on certain accessories and guns sky high. It's been a while since we've discussed our favorite topic.
That's great!
Things that go boom. Democratic Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut introduced an amendment to an appropriations bill Monday, seeking to impose a massive tax increase on suppressors and certain firearms. Now, if you haven't been paying attention, I believe it was in the big beautiful bill, the fee to get a tax stamp for a suppressor was eliminated in the big beautiful bill. So you still have to obtain a tax stamp. It just doesn't cost you anything. Well, Chris Murphy has filed a bill to overturn that and to create a gigantic tax on every firearm. The reconciliation bill signed into law by President Trump in July contained provisions that reduced the taxes on suppressors, short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, and guns described as, quote, any other weapon, to zero, as the Senate parliamentarian struck language that removed those items for any coverage of the 1934 National Firearms Act. Murphy's amendment, known as SA 4159, would restore the taxes and increase them to $4,709 per item. Now, here is let's see here. Let me get a screen share. I want to show you the amendment just so you know what it looks like. The entire screen. Okay, allow. This is going to look a little bit weird for a minute, but just roll with me. Okay, so here is the amendment. And it says SA 4159, and it's an increase in transfer and manufacturing taxes for firearms regulated under the National Firearms Act. And under subsection A, it says rate. There shall be levied, collected, and paid on firearms transferred a tax at the rate of $4,709 for each firearm transferred. So almost $5,000 for every single firearm that's going to be transferred. Now, I mean, again, it's not going to pass, and Trump is definitely not going to sign it. However, still pretty scary. You have people like Chris Murphy in there wanting to, really. And here's the thing. Chris Murphy knows that he cannot just outright ban firearms because we have this little thing called the Second Amendment. And so it has been the common move by liberals to increase taxes on those things. You see, if you can't prevent the object outright, you just make it so expensive that people can't afford it. There have been a lot of attempts to do this to ammunition, to create a tax on ammunition so that you just can't buy it. If you don't have any ammunition, you can't shoot your guns, therefore problem solved. Quote, this is actually not the first time Senator Chris Murphy has proposed this tyrannical tax hike, Gun Owners of America Federal Director Aiden Johnston told the Daily Caller News Foundation. Quote, his goal with this amendment is to price Americans out of their ability to exercise their Second Amendment rights, he's exactly right. Johnston noted that when enacted in 1934, the $200 tax imposed by the NFA was intended as a prohibitive financial barrier to owning a machine gun, adding that the figure Murphy selected adjusts the tax for inflation. So, in other words, what he's done is taken the original $200 tax, added all the inflation on top of it, and that's how he got to $4,709. Other pro-Second Amendment organizations also condemned the amendment that Murphy offered. Quote, while this amendment is unlikely to advance in the current Congress, it makes one thing clear. The Democrats see the NFA as an attractive target. This is exactly what we've warned about. They'll never stop at trying to ban guns outright. They'll just try to tax them out of reach. The National Association for Gun Rights told the Daily Caller. As long as the NFA's registration framework exists, we're going to keep fighting the same battle. The GOP should recognize this threat and end it at the source by dismantling the NFA entirely. Quote, I can only hope that someday Senator Murphy has as much disdain in his heart for criminals as he holds for law-abiding gun owners. You see, the Democrats are never going to stop in their attempts to ban the possession or purchase of firearms because they know if you are armed, they will not be able to enact all of their plans. A disarmed society is a compliant society. That is, if you don't have the means to protect yourself, then the Democrats will be able to do anything that they want to you. That's the purpose of the Second Amendment. It doesn't have anything to do with hunting. It doesn't have anything to do with recreation or sport or collecting or anything like that. The purpose of the Second Amendment is to protect you, yourself, your state, your country from tyranny. That is the only express purpose of it. And that's why it was written into the Constitution, or at least into the Bill of Rights, which was adopted after the Constitution was ratified, because we just got done fighting the Revolutionary War against a country that absolutely was tyrannical. Now, certainly all of those other things follow, hunting and sport and all of those things, but those are not the purpose of the Second Amendment. And the Democrats, as Chris Murphy is perfect evidence, will never stop trying to take your guns away from you. And, and here's the thing. Like, there are so many people on the left that say, well, no, we're not trying to take your guns away from you. We're just trying to pass common sense gun laws, which is the biggest canard. Like, if you ever hear that phrase, common sense gun regulations, you immediately know that the person who said it is talking about gun control. Second, you know that they're not really interested in common sense gun restrictions. They're interested in taking your guns away. And I mean, the reason why we run firearm legislation in the budget session in Wyoming is because there's an election right around the corner. And we know that, there isn't a politician in Wyoming that wants to get labeled as anti-gun, because it will pretty much spell the end of your political career. So, I mean, that's why we run gun laws in this time of year. And, I haven't really looked at the list of bills yet outside of what's coming out of appropriations. But I would assume that there's probably going to be a couple of different pieces of gun legislation that are going to crop up, and rightfully so. Now, when we come back, I have a report for you from James O'Keefe from the O'Keefe Media Group. He infiltrated, maybe that's the wrong word. He conducted an undercover investigation into a Secret Service agent. And this one should kind of scare the crap out of you. Because, what he uncovered is pretty crazy. So when we come back, we'll do that. Oh, I was on the wrong screen again. This is why I have Ken when he's not, serving the people and all this stuff. So let's try that again. When we come back, we'll talk about the Secret Service agent. There we go. That's better. Back in a minute. Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. Hunting season. Right about now, you're off with all of your pals, stalking the big gigantic elk or buck mule deer that you've been thinking about all summer long. And your lovely wife is at home, probably enjoying her time without you. But soon, my friend, all of that is going to come to a screeching halt. And I want you to think about just one little thing. She's able to park her car inside the garage because all of your hunting crap is with you right now. Now, if you'd like the marital bliss to continue, I suggest you make a call to Marcos and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. They can build you a garage or a barn or any other type of metal structure for you to store all of your toys in so that your wife can continue parking inside the garage. And you can avoid sleeping on the couch for the next month or two. Call Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. Get them to build you a metal building before it's too late. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live on a Friday. It is Open Line Friday, my friends. Welcome to the program. If you want to be part of the show, the phone number in the studio is 307-374-8989. 307-374-8989. Whatever's on your mind that you want to talk about, if you want to respond to one of the stories I've covered today, go ahead and give me a call. Or if there's something else that you you have just been, dying to talk about, well, then here is your chance, my friends. And so, as I mentioned before the break, there is a report out from James O'Keefe, and I mean, he used to be the head of Project Veritas, and he got fired, and he started his own group called the O'Keefe Media Group. And hold on just a second here. I'm trying to get, yeah, here we go. All right. So what I'm up to is during the break, our pal Ken Pendergraph sent me a graphic that puts the amount of money, the $40 million that the media is freaking out about that was cut yesterday, into perspective. So before I get to the Secret Service story, which we're going to do here in just a second, I want to show you this picture that Ken just sent me that will put the amount of money that was cut from the University of Wyoming into perspective for you. That, it is not the sky is falling, the Chicken Little scenario that, that all the liberals in the state have been screaming about. It's not that at all. In fact, and let me just show you this to you. I'm going to share the screen so you can take a look at this. All right, here we go. If it's this shows you the total budget of the University of Wyoming, $533 million, $500 million. And over on this side, it shows you the breakdown. I guess both sides show you the breakdown. But down here, budget revenues, $409 million for unrestricted operating, designated operating, $82 million, restricted expendable, $43 million, for a total of $533,760,202. And so when you compare the $40 million that was cut yesterday from the University of Wyoming's budget to their total budget, we're really talking about peanuts. I mean, it is, as Ken said, it is 10%, it's actually 10.7%, but 10% of one part of the entire budget for the University of Wyoming. And you can see right there, the total budget is $500 million. And so really, what Landon Brown is saying, what the rest of them are talking about, really isn't even based in reality at all. All right, so from the Blaze, Biden voting Secret Service agent stripped of security clearance after spilling the beans to an undercover reporter. Now, the Secret Service is charged, as you all know, with protecting the president, the president's family, the vice president's family. I mean, it's that one agency that we think, hey, they ought to be operating at tip-top shape. The problem is that they're not. And this report from James O'Keefe proves it. And here in just a second, I'm going to play you the video from his investigation. But first, let me give you the details on it. The agent is a Biden holdover assigned to protect Vice President J.D. Vance. And he allegedly leaked sensitive security intelligence. The U.S. Secret Service has placed an agent assigned to J.D. Vance's protective detail on administrative leave after he allegedly divulged sensitive security secrets to an undercover female reporter. And you're never going to guess where they hooked this guy. In the footage published on Tuesday by investigative journalist James O'Keefe, Secret Service agent Thomas Escato appears to share various specifics regarding Vance's security detail with the reporter, as well as photos revealing the methods used to transport the vice president. That's probably the most concerning part right there, that the Secret Service agent was divulging their methods. And you'll see in the video how he actually sent photos of how the cars are arranged around the vice president. What we uncovered is troubling, said O'Keefe, who indicated that the engagements took place in the wake of the attempted break-in at Vance's Cincinnati home. We hope that bringing this to light strengthens security and helps prevent future vulnerabilities in our government. Now, the video and text messages published by O'Keefe appear to show Escato, a self-identified Biden voter, providing the reporter with, listen to this list, real-time locations of the vice president, insights into Vance's future plans, the particulars of how far ahead and behind agents walk in relation to Vance, the security detail's shift schedule, photographs taken on duty containing location metadata, and photographs providing insights into how the vice president's vehicle is secured and stored for international travel. All of those things could be used by people who want to cause harm to the vice president. So let me go ahead and play this video for you, and then when we come back, we'll talk about it. Let's see here. I mean, this is just absolutely shocking, but I mean, it's just another example of people who are in, positions of, authority, positions of trust that weren't vetted properly. So here's the story from James O'Keefe.
Can I see your badge again with your photo? You're so cute.
A current Secret Service agent on Vice President J.D. Vance's security detail.
When he's like walking, like where are you?
If you follow him, we'll have at least a minimum head and
gives away vital high-level security information to our undercover journalists.
we have different shifts. We have shift.
Tells her about detailed future travel plans for the vice president, and even sends her pictures with location metadata revealing where the president's convoy was located, potentially violating both the Secret Service NDA and United States federal law. And Tomas is fully aware of this. Quote, I sign paperwork, so if I don't have to get out information, I never do, otherwise I get in trouble. You really have to stand in awe of the lack of self-awareness.
They know secret about what we do.
Tomas Escato also reveals that he voted for Biden and that he hates Trump and Vance's immigration policies.
Did you vote for Biden?
Yes, I did actually.
No. What do you think about like all the ICE stuff going on?
I hate that shit.
Yeah.
They're employing taxes that shouldn't be employed.
You may have seen reports last week that someone attempted to break into Vice President J.D. Vance's home in Ohio. That incident prompted us to take a closer look. What we found in our investigation was an agent inside the vice president's detail who was actually revealing to a total stranger that the vice president would be visiting his home in Ohio days ahead of time. And while what you're about to see is an important story, the security of the vice president and his family is our top priority. Now, under normal circumstances, our editorial policy is to request comment a day or two before a report airs. But in this case, we contacted the Secret Service a full week in advance of this report to ensure that nothing we report here would compromise the Vice President's safety in any way. But even with those precautions, what we uncovered is troubling, and we felt this is important for you all to see. We hope that bringing this to light strengthens security and helps prevent future vulnerabilities in our government.
Can I see your badge again with your photo? You said you were training. It was your training
Yeah, that's like
photo?
4 years ago.
You're so cute.
We met Thomas on the dating app Tinder in October of 2025. The Secret Service agent is a holdover from the Biden administration. He was actually originally tasked with protecting Kamala Harris and Doug Emhoff. In fact, he sent us this image from a Christmas party in December of 2024. There he is with Kamala Harris.
How did you get picked to do like vice president?
Not by choice, it's just they talk to you and they let you know. It's like, hey, eventually you're going to have to go down to D.C.
Okay.
All roads lead to D.C. now. So you can go to the president's detail, the vice president's detail, what we call counter surveillance division, so that's undercover stuff.
Note the irony, he's talking about undercover counter surveillance to a journalist wearing a hidden camera. Tomas Escato is often directly involved in the vice president's transportation to and from his residence at the Naval Observatory, surveillance of the vice president's residence, and even protecting Vance's wife, Usha Vance, and their children. Here he complains again to a total stranger he just met about his assignment involving...
Okay, well, you get the point here. We have people in the Secret Service that really don't have any respect for their security clearance or anything like it. And the reason I wanted to show you this is to show you the importance of investigative journalism. Now, we don't do a heck of a lot of that in our state. In fact, as far as I know, there hasn't been any investigative journalism that's happened, well, in the recent past, and certainly not a lot that's been done by anybody in the mainstream media, except the folks that are on the team of the Open Range Record. There's several investigative reports on there, all of which are pretty important. Some of them are at the local level, and others are at the state level. But one of the reasons, one of the main things that investigative journalism does is holds people accountable. And that is that, government officials, the media is supposed to do that. They're supposed to be the watchdog of government. And so that, your politicians, your unelected bureaucrats, they can't just run roughshod. And the reason I showed you this right after talking about the Wyoming Business Council is there's a whole bunch of stuff that they're doing that needs to be investigated. I mentioned the cosmetics company in Jackson. Why is it that we had to give somebody who is able to set up shop in the wealthiest county in America, why did we have to give her $2 million? She could very well open up shop somewhere else in Wyoming, do the exact same thing, and we didn't have to give her $2 million. The truth is, when we start, when the media stops investigating politicians and bureaucrats and government and stops holding them accountable, or worse, jumps in bed with them, hops on their team and pushes their own the agenda of those elected officials, they really do you a disservice. And that's one of the reasons why we started the Open Range Record, why I do what I do, is to provide you with an alternative, people that are actually doing journalism. Now, on this program, and I had a conversation with a friend of mine that he owns another newspaper in Wyoming, and he's kind of, he's involved in the Wyoming Press Association. And he made the comment, he said, the Wyoming Press Association doesn't see you as legitimate. And I'm like, of course they don't, because I refuse to play the media game in Wyoming. I refuse to toe the liberal line. I refuse to, report on things just because I happen to agree with the politician. I don't do that. And neither does the Open Range Record. And so, that's the big reason why we're so excited about, unveiling that to you. But and got way off topic there. But back to the piece in The Blaze about this Secret Service agent. After indicating in the footage that he only received his citizenship in 2018. Now, think about that. This guy moved to this country and only became a citizen in 2018, and now he's on the detail protecting the vice president. Let's see here. He criticizes the Trump administration's immigration policies, stating they're deploying tactics that shouldn't be deployed. Well, that's not your job. His job is not to agree or disagree. His job is to protect the vice president. O'Keefe noted that ahead of publishing the video, his team coordinated the U.S. Secret Service's redacting sensitive operational details at their request. So in other words, O'Keefe, he did the research, they did the investigative report, and then they contacted the Secret Service and said, look, this is what we've got. We know that some of this stuff shouldn't go out. You tell us what parts of it shouldn't be released to the public, and we'll go along with it. Blaze News reached out to Vance's office for comment. Deputy Secret Service Director Matthew Quinn confirmed in a statement to O'Keefe that the incident is under investigation and that the employee involved has been placed on administrative leave with his clearance suspended and access to agency facilities and systems revoked. The Secret Service is now requiring all personnel to retake the agency's anti-espionage training, quote, in order to ensure employees are aware of the threats posed by individuals aiming to exploit agency employees. So, in other words, and this is the point I was getting to before I played the video, they hooked him on the dating app Tinder. It seems like a pretty easy place for, some sort of foreign malactor to get a hold of somebody with a security clearance. But this is the caliber of people that the Secret Service has been employing. Now, in Wyoming, we have our own version of that, our own protection details. They're run by the Wyoming Highway Patrol. I think my cousin used to work for them, and it's kind of funny, but anytime I was at an event where the governor was and my cousin was, I'd play the game. Well, how many weapons does she have on her at any one time? But our Highway Patrol does a pretty good job protecting the governor and, anybody else that needs protection. Thank God that we don't have to rely on the Secret Service. Let's see here. We've kind of already beat the Wyoming Business Council horse to death. Let's go to the turkey vulture. And I kind of covered this at the beginning of the program, but there's a piece in the Wyoming Tribune Eagle entitled "Wyoming Lawmakers Clash Over Where to Stash $250 million in Surplus Revenue." And, this one, first, as I told you at the beginning of the show, if you have $250 million extra, that means that you've taxed people too much. And you should figure out a way to where you don't do that again. And second, where that money actually goes to the place it ought to, like back to taxpayers. But here's what, and this piece was originally published in Wildfile. Here's what Maggie Mullen has to say. Amid ongoing budget fights over spending, Wyoming lawmakers clashed Wednesday on the proper way to stash $250 million in savings. While Wyoming Freedom Caucus lawmakers called for placing $250 million of excess revenue into temporary savings to retain the ability to spend it at a later date, others supported Mark Gordon's recommendation to put that amount into permanent savings, where it would remain inaccessible but would generate spendable investment income in perpetuity. So, in other words, the argument is, should we put it in the account that you can't touch, or should we put it into an account that you can touch later? The Wyoming, let's see here. Tensions have run high this week in Cheyenne as the primary budgeting arm of the Wyoming legislature has been meeting at the Capitol to write a draft budget bill ahead of next month's legislative session. Debate has largely centered on cuts, including unprecedented measures to dismantle the Wyoming. Not unprecedented. The Wyoming Business Council has been screwing up a lot. And halt state dollars from funding Wyoming public media. That's absolutely what needs to be done. There's no reason why we need to have a government media arm. Lawmakers also voted to axe $40 million from the University of Wyoming's block grant to strip tens of millions from the state's health department. The driver of such cuts? Not a financial deficit, but a desire by a newly empowered group of Republicans known as the Freedom Caucus to reshape state government. No, it's okay. This is what I was talking about when the media engages in partisan politics with their allies in the Democrat and Redcoat parties. Quote, "We're going to do everything we can to limit the growth of government so it doesn't outpace your paychecks," Joint Appropriations Committee Chair John Bear said at a press conference in November. The caucus has criticized previous legislatures for stowing revenue in permanent savings. Those past decisions recently led to a record $1.86 billion in investment earnings, surpassing state revenues from the mineral industry. All right, so let me just repeat that for you. The caucus criticized previous legislatures for stowing revenue in permanent savings. Those past decisions recently led to a record $1.86 billion in investment earnings, surpassing state revenues from the mineral industry. So, in other words, there is a boatload of cash running through our state legislature. So much cash that we can't even spend it. $250 million was overtaxed from Wyoming citizens in the past biennium. And so, and it's amazing, like every time I go to the legislature, there is always an excess of funds. And I mean, that's the clearest indication that you could possibly have that we're taxing too much, whether we're taxing mineral industries and you by extension too much, or whether it's property taxes, which property taxes go to counties, they don't fund state government, or whether it's sales taxes. But the truth is, there's way more money coming into state coffers than is absolutely needed. Now, even so, Gordon urged lawmakers to significantly increase our savings, which are invested so to bring additional revenue to the state. Here's what Gordo said. As you know, these earnings from our savings, continue to help defray the costs taxpayers would otherwise have to pay. See, that right there, that line is the lie that the liberals use. So what they're saying is, well, if we don't put more money into the savings account, you are going to have to pay more in taxes. But there's no recognition that perhaps we spend way too much money right now. That there's a whole bunch of things that, and just think about the amount of money. So the Wyoming Business Council wanted $111 million. Now the governor cut that to roughly half, but still, that's $50 million that's going to be used, if it were to be approved, $50 million that would be used to compete with private business. Now, maybe not spend that money at all and force those businesses to compete in the free marketplace. Now, the piece goes on, and let's see here. Bear sought an alternative. He brought a motion Wednesday to place those dollars in the state's rainy day fund, officially titled the Legislative Stabilization Reserve Account, or the LSRA. The fund is consistently ranked as the nation's largest state reserve and as a share of its operating cost. While it also earns investment income, unlike permanent savings, lawmakers can dip into the account principal, not just the investment income it generates to cover expenses. Now, here's why John Bear suggests we do that. Because in the very near future, our education spending is going to outpace the amount of money coming in. And there was a great chart that was put outside, and it's probably still there, of the appropriations meeting room. And it shows what would happen if oil dipped, I think it was either $10 or $20 a barrel, what that would do to the state's finances. And the amount of money that we're spending on education, $21,700 per student, would end up putting the entire state in the red. So the truth is that we are spending a tremendous amount of money. Let's see here. Here's what John Bear said. There are many arguments to be made that the legislature is far too liberal about spending this money down the road, and it should be protected by putting it in a constitutionally protected account, which is what the governor has recommended, Bear said. But as I look at the long-term forecast with the potential of being in deficit spending on education, that's what I just explained, I think it's important that the legislature have funds available in the next 2 years, especially in the next 4 years, to be able to meet those needs in education funding, where this money being tied up in permanent savings would not be available to the body. So in other words, the legislature is facing a lawsuit from the Wyoming Education Association that we don't spend enough on education. We have a recalibration committee going on, and we really don't know what they're going to do. But the smart money, I think, is that there will end up being some adjustments to the way that we fund education, and so the legislature has a better handle on it. Now, I don't think that there could be a wholesale reduction in education spending, simply because we have a court ruling. I mean, it's a big mess tied up in court. Now, Ogden Driscoll, on the other hand, here's what he said. We're sitting on one of the biggest sovereign wealth funds in the nation, and our budget's balanced with yet another year of excess money, Driscoll said. We're not arguing like I did back when we cut $400 million we didn't have. In response, Bear pointed to the committee's attempt to spend less money and a forthcoming ballot initiative to cut residential property taxes, which fund local governments and education by 50%. The reduction would be in addition to the 25% exemption that lawmakers already put on the books. So my guess is when that ballot initiative hits, it is going to pass. And the legislature needs to be, fully aware of that. That Wyoming citizens are frankly tired of being taxed out of their homes. And without the legislature doing anything about it, that is, changing the way that we assess property taxes, well, this initiative is going to have to pass. I mean, there are lots of cases statewide where little old ladies can't pay the property taxes on their home, and they're forced to sell. There's a gal in Sheridan that I met. I mean, she's elderly. She's in her 80s. She took a job waiting tables at Perkins to pay for her property taxes. I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous. You have people that have been paying taxes for 30, 40, 50 years, some of them. And now, if they don't pay their property taxes, they're going to lose their home. That's just wrong. So anyway, we've got a big debate going on with what to do with that $250 million. If it were up to me, I would say give some of that money back to Wyoming citizens, because that's who you took it from. Well, let's go ahead and take our last break, and when we come back, we'll finish up the program. Yeah, I know. The weather seems to be toying with us. 60 one day, 42 the next, and pretty soon, my friends, those 6s and 4s are going to turn into 3s and 2s. Though we all want to avoid it, that white stuff is coming, my friends, and you will be shoveling the walk in it. It's cold, it's unpleasant, and nobody likes to do it. But you could make it just a little bit more comfortable and prevent your feet from turning into a giant block of ice. In fact, you could keep them nice and warm and toasty, and your toes will never even know that they're outside. The rest of you may be frozen solid, but at least your feet won't be. To make all this happen, you just need a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They are the finest socks that I've ever put on my feet. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you won't be disappointed. Are you one of those guys that listen to the president just a little bit too closely and now you're tired of winning? Are you getting the feeling that there's been way too many good things happening in our country and you just can't take it anymore? Well, if you are, and you think you should follow Rosie O'Donnell's example and get the heck out of Dodge, you need to call Rebecca Bextel at eXp Realty. She'll make those foreign country living ideas a reality for you. All you have to do is call 307-699-3519, and she'll make sure some freedom-loving, red-blooded American will now live in the home that you no longer want. If you want to sell your house, or if you want to buy one that's way better than the house you have right now, give Rebecca a call. Again, her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Cowboy State Politics is only going to get stronger. This program is only going to continue to expand. The Cowboy State Politics Podcast, Cowboy State Politics Live, and now we've added on top of it the Open Range Record, a site that we are all very, very proud of. And if you haven't checked it out yet, go to the website, openrangerecord.com. It's a different way to look at the news. And this one is going to come to as a shocker to you. News on the news page, opinion on the opinion page. When and this, I don't know why this is so revolutionary. Well, I do know why. It's because the mainstream media doesn't do this. But when a news outlet just flat out admits this is news, this over here is opinion, and it's labeled as such, and that shouldn't be that big of a hurdle, big of a river to cross, or however you want to put it. But it is because most of what you see in the media, whether it's national media or state media, isn't news at all. It's opinion that's wrapped up to look like news. And that's what you get. And you need no further evidence of that than, there was a piece from Maggie Mullen that I brought up to you just a little bit ago. I mean, okay, so it was published by Wildfile to begin with, and they're not exactly an unbiased news source. I mean, they have Kerry Drake as one of their opinion columns. That guy's about as left-wing as you can get. And who would have thought, right? He's a retread from the Pravda on the Platte. He used to be the editor there. But any of these news outlets, the Cowboy, the Turkey Vulture, the Turkey Vulture is a little bit better, not by much, but a little bit better than some of the others. They don't really publish news. Every article they put out is pretty well biased. We're not going to do that at the Open Range Record. In fact, we're going to tell you, hey, we think this is a news article. We think this one over here is definitely an opinion article. And when the legislative session comes up, we're going to have a nightly news broadcast. I say nightly, but we don't really know what the schedule is going to be. My thinking on it is maybe Tuesday through Friday, but we've made no decisions on that. But we're going to try to bring you news in a different way that you're not getting right now. And I think we're already doing that. The website has got a tremendous amount of views on it so far. And if you go to it right now, theopenrangerecord.com, my interview with Superintendent of Public Instruction Megan Degenfelder is front and center. And it's a great interview. I didn't pull any punches with her. I asked her about a couple of different times about her votes on windmills and her being educated in China. That one was pretty interesting because she claims to have studied economics in China. Why, if you're interested in economics, in how the economy should and actually does work, would you go to China to study that? That one didn't make any sense to me, but you can listen to her answer. My goal is today, I'm going to publish a transcript of that interview. I say that's a goal because I don't know if I'll get it done. But anyway, go check out the Open Range Record. It's openrangerecord.com. It's a great website. We're extraordinarily proud of it. And coming very, 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 very soon, we'll also have a mobile app to go along with it. From the Washington Free Beacon, Democrats are begging radical members not to revive the abolish ICE craze, but it's not working. Now, the Democrats in Wyoming, their whole, I think that they're going to hedge their whole campaign on how evil the Freedom Caucus is. I mean, that's everything they've been, pointing all their guns at for the last couple of months. So it makes sense. That's what they're going to do. But nationally, the radical Democrats are very much on this whole let's get rid of ICE craze. Here's what the Free Beacon says. 2 left-leaning advocacy groups published memos this week urging Democrats not to get swept up in the frenzy of anti-ICE rhetoric unleashed after an ICE officer shot and killed Renee Nicole Good in Minneapolis. The Searchlight Institute, a think tank founded by former Senator John Fetterman, advised by Adam Gentleson, thought it was necessary to remind Democrats that advocating for abolishing ICE is tantamount to advocating for stopping enforcement of all of our immigration laws, a policy that is wrong on the merits and at odds with the American public, Fetterman said. And it is. We absolutely have to enforce the law, specifically immigration law. A country without borders is not a country at all. And, and this is how insane the left's argument is on this. If you cross into Mexico illegally and you're caught, what is going to happen to you? You're going to be thrown into the worst, terrible smelling, ugly, dangerous Mexican jail that you can think of. And there isn't going to be any question about it. You're not going to have a federal judge say, oh, no, you got to let that illegal alien out. You're going to jail. And most countries are like that. Now, Europe is a little bit different. They have open borders and all that crazy stuff. But there's a ton of countries that if you're caught as an illegal immigrant in their country, you are going straight to jail. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Third Way, a moderate think tank, warned Democrats that caving to the abolish ICE mob would be politically lethal and squander one of the clearest opportunities in years for meaningful reform. That is precisely what happened in 2020, the group argued, when enough Democrats embraced or refused to condemn the activist-led campaign to defund the police following George Floyd's death. We shouldn't be the party against enforcement entirely, Third Way wrote on X. Now, that message is falling on deaf ears. Left-wing activists, and you can see this in Wyoming, too. Just last weekend, of course, Christine and I were in in New York when this was going on, but there was a protest in downtown Sheridan about, defunding ICE and getting rid of ICE and let all the immigrants go. They're illegal aliens. They're not immigrants. But there've been protests in Wyoming talking about defunding ICE. So yes, national politics does affect Wyoming, specifically when you have the radical Democrats in our state standing on street corners holding signs. The message has fallen on deaf ears. Left-wing activists demanded ICE be dismantled in the wake of Good's death. Now, Rachel Good absolutely deserved to be shot. She was told to stop. She didn't stop. When an officer is threatened, what do? They pull their gun. And if you continually threaten them and you try to run over an officer, you're going to get shot. I mean, it is suicide by police is what it now. I mean, she just thought she was going to get away with it. But Renee Good was a victim of her own actions. She tried to harm a law enforcement officer. And when you do that, bad things happen to you. Democratic candidates running in contested primaries were eager to express their solidarity. Graham Plattner, he's the guy that had the Nazi tattoo, running for U.S. Senate in Maine, has repeatedly argued that ICE should not exist and called for its agents to be prosecuted. People need to go to prison, he said in November. Abdul El Sayed, a Hamas-adjacent candidate running for Senate in Michigan, wrote last week that ICE was, quote, not law enforcement. So like I said in 2018, abolish ICE. Now, the truth is, this message isn't going to play well in Wyoming, and the Democrats and liberal redcoats here know that. Wyoming is a very pro-law enforcement state, and any sort of messaging like abolish ICE, get rid of law enforcement, illegal aliens, that's not going to play well in Wyoming. In fact, I mean, that's an easy way to lose a race. However, what you will hear is some rhetoric coming from the radical left in Wyoming that is abolish ICE adjacent. You won't hear candidates go full bore, get rid of law enforcement, but what you will hear is immigration reform. You will hear arguments in the campaign of how we shouldn't be arresting, illegal aliens for driving on I-80 or I-25, which we absolutely should. If you don't have a license, you don't need to be driving. And so while you won't outright hear these themes in Wyoming elections, you will hear, you're going to hear arguments that are adjacent to them. Immigration reform. There was a law passed last year, last session, where if you're not a citizen, it has to be marked on your driver's license. So you're going to see attempts to repeal that, and you will see radical leftists in Wyoming try to advocate for, those pro illegal alien adjacent type of policies. But they won't be able to come straight out. So the trick is going to be, and I've long said that the Democrat Party is surging in Wyoming. And if you need any evidence of that, just look at the protests that have been held all summer long and one that was held last weekend. The Sheridan Press reported that there was 50 or 60 people on the street corner, which is a pretty good sized protest for, a small Wyoming town, 20,000 people. Yeah. During the summer, they had well over 100 on the courthouse steps during one of their No Kings protests. So you don't get that kind of response, participation, whatever you want to call it, unless the Democrats are actually surging in Wyoming. Now, are they going to get more seats than the 6 that they have in the House and the 2 in the Senate? Maybe 1 or 2. But still, most of the Democrats in Wyoming are registered Republicans. They're redcoats that joined the Republican Party so that they could get elected. So, you need to be on the lookout for these types of themes in the election. And I don't think that you're going to see it in, some of the smaller districts. However, when you get close to Casper, Cheyenne, Laramie, my guess is you're going to see a lot of this type of rhetoric. So, the real crazies are on the national level, but that doesn't mean that there aren't some of those here in the Cowboy state. Let's see here. So, we were in New York earlier this week, and I didn't really see anything that was, that like the big flashing neon sign that said Mom Donnie is the mayor. Now, I did do a little bit of man on the street stuff, and I've got those recorded. I'll bring those to you next week. But there's a piece in the Free Press entitled "Billionaires Can Flee Mamdani, but Small Businesses Can't Hide." And I quote, New York City Mayor Zoran Mamdani promised at his inauguration to govern expansively and audaciously. In practice, that promise means governing expensively, too. And paying for it would require higher taxes on both individuals and corporations. Individuals can dodge Mamdani by moving to Florida, and some undoubtedly will. When it comes to taxes, though, corporations are largely stuck for reasons that have gotten little attention in Mamdani's rapid political ascent. Depending on your perspective, that makes corporations either a tempting target or an unfortunate victim. The hurdle for Mamdani's agenda, from universal child care to fare-free buses to city-owned grocery stores, is a lack of funds. Mamdani must rely on Democrats in Albany to come up with substantial parts of the money. So a lot of the plans that he talked about during the campaign for the mayor's office, he has to get the buy-in from lawmakers in Albany. So a lot of the stuff he said just isn't going to happen. Now, the reason corporate income taxes are hard to escape is that both the state and the city tax corporations, on the basis of how many of their sales are generated locally. They don't take into account how many people the corporations employ locally or how much property they have locally. If a corporation has half of its sales in New York City, half of its profits will be subject to state and city income taxes. End of story. You might see where this is going. Suppose New York State raises its top corporate income tax rate to 11.5% from 7.25%. As Mamdani has asked Hochul and the legislature to do, in hopes that a lot of that extra state revenue will flow to the city in the form of state aid. That would be a big tax hike. Yet, for a company that's unhappy paying that much, moving to Florida with all its staff would not reduce its tax liability by a penny. Assuming half of its sales are still in New York, half of its profits would remain subject to New York taxes. So, in other words, businesses can't get away from it. And if you want businesses to close, well, then just increase taxes on them. Now, the hurdle for Mamdani's agenda is a lack of funds. Mamdani must rely on Democrats in Albany to come up with a substantial part of the money. While all corporations are affected, some are more stuck than others. Least affected if Mamdani gets his way, are large New York-based multinationals such as Pfizer, Goldman Sachs, American Express, that get the vast majority of the revenue from customers outside of New York City. They would face higher tax rates from New York authorities, but those higher tax rates would apply to only a small portion of their income. Same with out-of-state corporations such as Amazon and Microsoft. Much more affected would be local corporations that predominantly serve customers in New York. That's the market that they know. And in other words, and this is the reason why I'm bringing this up, is that when you pass any sort of taxes, it is not the business itself that pays the taxes. It is individual customers, the people that buy your goods or your service. You see, businesses don't pay taxes. They pass that cost on to consumers because, a business is not going to decrease their bottom line, or increase their bottom line, sorry, and they're not going to decrease their profits. Rather, they're just going to increase prices and pass that on to consumers. Any smart businessman would do that. And so anytime you see an increase in taxes, you see a decrease in business. Now, let me tell you what this means in Wyoming. Since we're approaching the legislative session, and there are a number of proposals and I already mentioned the $250 million. If the state continues to tax at the rate that it is, you will not see business expand because it can't. Because property taxes are already really high. Individuals and businesses pay property taxes at the same. You're not going to see any sort of proposal. You remember that constitutional amendment that was passed a couple of years ago that we could we could create one class of property, residential property, and then we could tax another one differently. Well, you're not going to see that change either, because you have a conservative-run House of Representatives. But there will be attempts to increase the amount of money to agencies like the Wyoming Business Council, to, and we always hear this, invest more money in our rainy day fund, all of that stuff. But the reality is, when you have excess tax revenue, that money needs to go back to citizens. And, I doubt very seriously that we're going to see anything like what's happening in New York with their new mayor. But we should always be on the lookout for, and tax and spend liberals. And there are a ton of those that are in Cheyenne. All right, well, it's a little bit early, but we've pretty much burned up a busy broadcast day on the program. It's Friday. I've got some stuff to do. Have a good weekend. Now, tomorrow on the podcast, I'm going to play the Megan Degenfelder interview, and a very special day tomorrow, though we're not going to celebrate tomorrow because I'm working on a couple of things for a 1,000th episode extravaganza, and I'm working on getting a truly amazing guest. It's going to be a good time, but it's taking a little bit to put up. So tomorrow is the 1,000th episode of Cowboy State Politics. I'm very, very, very proud that we've been able to put together that many shows. So that's tomorrow. It's going to be the Megan Degenfelder episode, and then we'll be back with Cowboy State Politics live on next Tuesday. Have a good weekend, my friends. The weather is not really looking all that great. So, but still get up in the mountains while you can. The snow is coming. But for now, my friends, from the base of the Bighorns, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics. Have a good weekend, my friends.